At the public school where I went, graduation was more than just simply meeting some base requirements. And that sounded like an advertisement. What I mean is, we had to focus a portion of our studies on our lives post-high school. In fact, in my state, career education is a mandatory part of the curriculum everywhere. Of course, in typical American public school fashion, this career education was half-baked at best and seemingly useless at worst. Essentially, once or maybe even twice a month, we'd all meet in our homeroom for an extended period of time and do something? This something usually manifested itself as watching some sort of TED Talk, or as time for things guidance counselors should be regularly meeting you for. However, there were other days which were much more exciting. I remember I was in 9th grade, and one day I was handed this test. This test was called the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, or MBTI for short. The MBTI is a personality test, maybe even the personality test at this point, considering how often I run into it. Rather than explaining the MBTI at this point, I think it would be more beneficial if I showed you. So, alright, we're doing this all in one take. You regularly make new friends. No! Complex and novel ideas excite you more than simple and straight. Yes. You feel more persuaded by what resonates with you emotionally than by factual arguments. Isn't that, like, everyone, though? We're gonna go with I don't know, it depends. Everybody has a way to deal with the mess. For me, I have, there's that one drawer in the corner that just contains, a whole mess of cables, and I just haven't bothered looking at it. Whenever I see something, I just throw it in there and, ignore it, but generally speaking, you stay calm even under a lot of pressure. I'm gonna go with a medium no on that. Yeah, kinda. You prioritize and plan tasks effectively, often completing them well before the deadline. But it's weird, right? Coupling these two things together in this way, it's like you have to either agree to both of them or none of them. Again, isn't that just everyone, though? For that reason, I'm gonna have to go slightly agree on that. You prioritize... Oh... facts over people's feelings. Okay, Ben Shapiro. I want to prioritize facts over people's feelings, but I also understand that maybe not considering people's feelings can lead to me doing and saying things that are unempathetic. I don't know, I'll go partially agree on that one. You often allow the day to unfold without any schedule at all. Yes. You prioritize being sensitive over being completely honest. You favor efficiency in decisions even if it means disregarding some emotional aspects. In a lot of cases, it's easier to get things done if you're not accounting for every single person's opinion. We try to avoid that as much as possible, right? I think any well-rounded human being should try to avoid sacrificing emotions for efficiency. When I chop this together in the editing room, it's just gonna be so samey because that's just such a pervasive problem with this test, is this tendency to conflate inefficiency with the presence of emotionality. So unfortunately, I prefer efficiency over, say, people just doing whatever they want, but not at the detriment of people's emotions. Well, that's just weak. You should at least, have some confidence in your stances, even if they suck. Is anyone? You're describing a person that doesn't exist. Yes, everybody is easily swayed by emotional arguments. Your friends would describe you as lively and outgoing. My friends would, sure, but nobody else besides my friends. You usually base your choices on objective facts rather than emotional. Who does this? I'd say yes, back when I was a fat piece of shit, I was basing my choices on the emotional drive to consume as much as possible. Now that I'm a little older, sure, my lifestyle is really more informed by the fact that being fat is bad for you, so I guess I'll agree on principle. See, this part here, when making decisions, you focus more on how the affected people might feel than what's most logical or efficient. These are almost like two separate questions. This is more of an insight on a person's philosophy, where this is more on, an insight on what the person is, and they've just kind of, lumped them together in the same spot and expect people's philosophies to align with their actions. Sure, you may believe that you focus on what's most logical or efficient, generally, but say when you're making decisions, you don't. When somebody thinks highly of you, you wonder how long it will take them to feel disappointed in you. That's just depression. That's sad. No. I like to think I look for further proof before I make decisions, but I think generally speaking, I follow my gut instincts. In my day-to-day life, philosophically, it's different, obviously, as it should be. Feel confident that things will work out for you. Dude, Rigby. MBTI test results. INTPT. As an INTP logician, you possess a unique blend of intellectual curiosity, analytical prowess, and a penchant for abstract thinking. Your mind is a playground of ideas, constantly exploring complex concepts and seeking to understand the underlying principles of the world around you. You approach the life with a rational, logical mindset, preferring to rely on facts and reason rather than emotions or conventional wisdom. Blah 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 blah. You're basically Einstein. Okay, cool, whatever. Cognitive abilities are undeniably lead to challenges in the social realm. Oh, here we go. This is very important. Your career path. Okay. Scientific research, software development, data analysis, or philosophical inquiry. Quick learner. Connecting ideas. Excels at linking seemingly unrelated concepts. Objective perspective. Seeking truth. My relationships. Oh boy. Your story is not complete yet. Pay $9 to get what exactly? It's like paywalled. Let's see, logicians you may know. Oh look, it's it's Mr. Microsoft. Oh yeah, the obligatory Albert Einstein, Mr. Descartes wheel. All right, Mr. Triangle Boy. Let's see, Bruce Banner. I freaking love analyzing everything in this amazing world. $9. Do I shell out the $9 for the MBTI? No. Typology is a beauty and skincare public benefit company based in France. It's also defined by Merriam-Webster as the study of or analysis or classification based on types or categories. Typology is so common in our modern lexicon that it shows up in places where you least expect it. For example, the way we treat politics is typological. You're either left-wing or right-wing or pro-life or pro-choice. Without these categories, we need to describe our political views in granular detail. To be fair, the typological hell zone known as PolCompBall Wiki, a subject I could make a whole video about, ends up doing this anyway. Not having to do this makes finding like-minded people easier and dehumanizing your enemies a breeze. However, when I use the word typology, I'm specifically referring to the typology of the human mind. This is the kind of typology, running alongside the field of psychometrics, that tests like the MBTI and Navient self-discovery deal in. Because there's just something so alluring about the prospect of being able to simplify something as complex as personality so we can understand it better. After all, people, much like politics, are hard, and what's more human than making hard things easier? Understanding human behavior, when done well, can be quite an exciting thing. But I wouldn't be making this video if the previous examples were done well, now wouldn't I? Acceptance by non-experts isn't a marker of validity, it's a signal of popularity. These are the exact words Adam Grant used when referring to the reputation of this godforsaken test. There's a ton of stuff behind this quote that's worth uncovering, and it's all fundamentally surrounded by this reality. Popularity is one hell of a drug. I say that because it's one that affects the dealers almost as much as, if not more than, the user. There are some unpredictable effects of popularity. One of these effects is getting a subreddit made in your own name. r/MBTI, much like any other church, is a warm, happy place where believers congregate. Catboy INTJ! But in the interest of avoiding coming across as insulting, I'll give you another, unrelated, example. Can you, dear viewer, bend spoons with your mind? Of course, if you're like me, your response was probably, what? Huh? Maybe a laugh followed by,
there is no spoon?
For Israeli-born psychic Uri Geller, the answer to this question is his life's work. Capitalizing on the market of people tripping on acid in the early 1970s, Uri Geller traveled worldwide performing his telepathy routine.
As you know, I told your people what to bring.
Mm-hmm.
One of the...
And we have 10 aluminum cans there and 10 over here.
I was already trying to concentrate, so I'll just move my hands over them, and if I'll feel for...
And one of them contains water,
I
of
like
the 10.
to do it the way we'll start eliminating the ones that do not have the water. Pick gently the middle one out without touching
Take the middle one out.
He is really suspicious, you know. Can you take this spoon in your hand?
Put this spoon in my hand. This one.
Take it and hold it like that. Hold it very... No, open it and put your other hand on it, gently, like this. I'll put my hand over your finger. Tell me if you feel, and press it, like, feel the whole, tell me if you feel anything coming from my hand.
My whole, like, the energies in this place it's just, it's like my whole body just feels like it's like a goosebumps.
Wow, I really
Ori has a history of abusing DMCA to silence content creators, especially the ones that are any less complimentary than those weird video testimonials. So, unfortunately, if this video disappears anytime soon, it'll be that riveting footage to blame. Before I continue on, I'd like to reel it back a bit. Am I suggesting that the MBTI is as ridiculous as Uri Geller? No.
Well, then what the hell does magic have to do with typology?
Well, as with the hilarious obvious cases like the Four Humors and astrology, the magic that keeps people coming back to these tests is the same old magic that kept viewers coming back to psychics like Geller. This magic is called the Barnum effect. The Barnum effect is the psychological phenomenon where vague descriptions offered by people who seem credible become interpreted as answers. This phenomenon was first described in 1949 by Bertram Robin Forer. In the case of Geller, the Barnum effect manifests itself as his audience believing in his psychic abilities, and with the MBTI, it's test takers feeling affirmed by their test results. But unlike Geller, whose Barnum effect is so blatantly obvious that you almost feel bad, the magic behind typology can be very subtle. Honestly, how much do you really know about the MBTI? Well, the MBTI is the creation of Isabel Myers-Briggs. Briggs was a fiction author and not a psychologist. Admittedly, she was friends of a lot of colleges, and her mother was an academic fanatic, but let it be known, Isabel Myers-Briggs was not a psychologist, but this website would not make that apparent. The test itself is a descendant of an old and highly simplistic set. Yeah, you may have heard of it. This is extrovert, introvert, oh yeah, and middle. This system of typology was plucked directly from the mind of the guy that invented it. Yes, famous smart guy Carl Jung created his types out of just kind of vibes. When vibes weren't enough, Jung drew upon Nietzsche and some poetry philosopher to fill in the gaps. None of this should be surprising, as psychology was in its early stages anyway. I applaud Jung, though, for choosing to organize people somewhat rationally during a time when the only extensive theories of personality were that hypersexed Freud guy's terms. You know, anal retentive, oral receptive, or downright geriatric ideas like the four ha-ha funnies. Side note, could you imagine if we treated Freud's personality theories like the MBTI? Hey Reddit, how do other phallic aggressives manage their workload? Anyway, when Jung grew unsatisfied with the whole introvert-extrovert thing as a means of diagnosing people, he doubled down, splitting people up into these familiar-looking subcategories. It's apparent that Isabel and her mother idolized this system and wished to emulate it in their own test by yoinking Jung's already years-old dichotomous model and smashing it into itself. Oh yeah, and administering a test whose results rely on the honesty of the person taking it. And they love their tests so much that they built a wall or foundation around it to keep the research in. Needless to say, the MBTI has been scrutinized to death by people who are much more knowledgeable in the subject than I am, and I'm only really adding fuel to a dead horse by throwing my hat into the ring. Psychologists worth their salt don't even use typology, at least not systems like the MBTI. Their work is associated with the Big Five, which is a well-attested system that I've neglected to mention up until this point. The Big Five pulls its categories from something very intuitive. That is, the adjectives we use to describe behaviors rather than just building its theory of personality from the ground up, a la Jung. Unlike the MBTI, its results are based on a large body of independent and rigorous scientific research. And rather than relying on a dichotomous or category-based model, most interpretations express the metric as purely a percentage or a score rather than a category, such as this one. While I'm not an expert in the field of psychometrics, even I'm able to pick up on how much more usable this method is. The Big Five are more like things you have rather than things you are, or in other words, much less letter astrology and more tangible descriptions. This non-typological approach runs especially counter to the Barnum effect, since they're not supposed to be framed as vague descriptions of people, you know, the way something like ESFJ might be. Also, notice how it doesn't pit thinking and feeling against each other, as if they're mutually exclusive behaviors. In fact, there's no reference to this dichotomy in the Big Five at all, rather the more pointed neuroticism, which is defined as a tendency to feel negative emotions. This neuroticism category is so good, in fact, the MBTI decided to give up a while back and included it anyway in the form of this weird comfort-discomfort thing. To any MBTI stands out there, I have two questions. 1. Was Ted Kaczynski a thinking or feeling type? And 2. Was what he did a product of thoughts or feelings? I know I'm using an extreme example again, and maybe I'm being a little unfair, but these are the kinds of portals that you open when you don't separate insanity and compassion from each other, and instead blend them together into one large nebulous feeling smoothie. You take this nebulous feeling and pit it against one called thinking. You know, thinking. Not rational or methodical. Thinking. Something that any human being with a brain is capable of doing. Or maybe feeling types are implied to be dumb. Wow, what a wonderful message to send to your test takers.
Emotions are the absence of thoughts.
Am I reading too far between the lines? Am I the only one who thinks that this should be controversial? Ugh. Before I become irrational myself, I want to be charitable. The purpose of typology was never to draw hard lines and to force people into immovable boxes. Not even the MBTI is that lofty with its goals. In fact, the MBTI publicly disavows anyone who utilizes the test as a selection aid or any other means of evaluating employees. So it seems that the need to know how we work was never one that originated out of malice, rather out of ignorance. In a world where things we don't know often feel restrictive, all we want to do is understand. Now take a walk with me, and watch as this whole thing is bent even more like Yeller spoons. Welcome to the world of corporate tests. It's a minimalistic world, one where people become friendly adjectives and all your horoscopes read productive. Made with empathy. Skyward Ed Leader. Check this one out. If you weren't paying attention earlier, make sure you notice words like empath and ambassador, and jot them down. We'll be looking for them in your next quarterly review. Is your leadership style that of a hurricane or a gardener? It's verbiage like this that intrigues me the most, because it almost seems as though it's intentionally designed to be as marketable as possible. That's because it is. Look again at the MBTI website now. Even without commenting on the validity of these conclusions, why? Why do we need to know that intuitives care more about art than censors? Why do these labels matter in this context? Why is it important that judgers are more orderly than perceivers? If these categories predict what careers people are going to choose, then why is there so much emphasis on accommodating them? If the need to know how we work was truly innocent, why is the focus so heavily on work? Well, just as pitting yourself as a leftist makes your political beliefs easier for the online belly to digest, being an empath makes your personality easier to glean for any prying employers. I am in no way accusing the MBTI of exclusively gearing their test toward the private sector, but I am accusing this one. Skyward is a company whose clientele is, transparently, exhausted employers in the education sphere. They're one out of many in a $2+ billion corporate test industry, actually. And don't think for a minute that the MBTI gets off scot-free just because they aren't exactly corporate. Every major consulting firm has sung the MBTI's praises at some point. Good old Goldman Sachs used it as a marketing campaign. But to use a more human perspective, this entire industry has twice as much value as the, as of 2022, so take this with a grain of salt, $1.4 billion tomato industry in California, which requires 229,000 acres of land and accounts for a quarter of the world's market share of such products. Of course, this is a silly comparison. I'm comparing a product that's delicious and nutritious to a product whose existence is backed entirely by weak science, popularity, and corporate optimization. I hope you're starting to see where my issue with these personality tests lies. I don't just dislike the MBTI because it's a bad test. I dislike it because of how it's used. Pardon me while I indulge myself here. Knowing that you're a logician won't change anything lest you actually work to better understand yourself. Knowing the typology of your employees doesn't actually replace making an effort to understand them as the dynamic, fully alive human beings they are. We desire the magic of typology just so we can wish away this hardship, so as to chase some fantasy of maximum optimization, whether it be in the workforce or any other aspect of your busy life. Or maybe, if you want to get all Freud, to give us some sense of control. A sense of control over the inherent imperfection and uncertainty that being a human being comes with. We alter our reality with the power of our minds, and thereby we bend the spoon. In this same vein, I don't dislike Uri Geller because of what he does or even what he claims to do. I dislike Uri Geller because of what he represents and what he leaves in his wake. From our employers to our schools, we deserve better. The philosophy surrounding the usage of these tests is fundamentally flawed. We're chasing something impossible and unnecessary with tools that don't work. But go on. Throw people into boxes based on some vague description of their personality. Bulk categorize your new employees. That is, if you haven't outright rejected their application based on the same test. To be fair, this is a practice that might not even be legal anymore, thank God. I mean, they were the 4th empath this week, to be frank. All the INFJs in this department, all ESFPs in this one. Hell, why not go one further? Put yourself into a box. After all, an INFP could never be an engineer, so why even bother? I know my school's guidance department would never mislead me. Oh yeah, and this other test told me I should be an architect. Oh, and remind me to break up with my partner later. They're an INTJ. It would never work out anyway. I appreciate those of you who stuck around to the end. It's not that long, but it is on the longer form side of YouTube content. I tried to represent all the sources I used in the making of this video as best as I could during the video, but any of those that I've left out will get linked in the description. Again, thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.
What's up everybody, it's Critical. I'm so far past my cultural zenith that referencing me in a video essay is probably going to result in a few of my viewers facepalming.